Hello everyone. You're all very welcome here today to our Dangerous Goods webinar, Module 11 of the FIATA Diploma course. This is Gráinne here working with Seamus Kavanagh in the IIFA office. I am delighted to be discussing this topic, dangerous goods, as I think it is very interesting and also very important. To handle hazardous shipments successfully, you need to be trained and have a very good understanding of all the regulations and documents required, and most importantly, where and how to obtain that information and how to apply that knowledge correctly. You also need to know when you have to verify information, and this requires knowledge and experience in handling dangerous goods. The reason why there are dangerous goods regulations is ultimately for safety and to limit the risks involved in the movement of hazardous cargo. The topics we are covering are definition of hazardous cargo, the Orange Book and transport regulations, hazardous classifications and subdivisions, explanation of flashpoint and spontaneous combustion, 5 steps to be followed, additional labels, shipper's declaration, documentation for all modes of transport, driver requirements, Kemmler plate on vehicles, placards on containers and vehicles, accident emergency, dangerous goods safety advisor, employee training, freight forwarders' responsibilities, FIATA. According to FIATA, dangerous goods are articles and substances which, because of their nature, property or condition, could in the course of transport, handling or storage, endanger public safety or order, human or animal life, the environment or property. And also, under the IMDG code, it is or any empty receptacle which may contain residue. Unless you have a gas-free certificate or equivalent, then the receptacle should be treated as if it was full of the product. The Orange Book is published by the United Nations Committee of Experts on the Transport of Dangerous Goods. It sets out the minimum requirements, the UN recommendations for the safe transport of dangerous goods for all modes of transport, air, sea, road, rail, inland waterways. The aim is to improve and develop both recommendations and regulations with a view to standardisation. The regulations concerning the carriage of dangerous goods via all modes of transport is based on the UN recommendations as outlined in the Orange Book. So for sea freight, it will be the IMDG code, air freight, IIFA, European road transport is the ADR, rail is RID, and inland waterways is ADN. The International Maritime Dangerous Good IMDG code is published by the International Maritime Organization. It is based on the UN recommendations in the Orange Book. Ireland and the UK signed agreements to abide by the IMDG code in 1968 and 1978, and the code is legally enforceable in Ireland with penalties for non-compliance. Technical instructions for the safe transport of dangerous goods by air is published by the International Civil Aviation Organization every 2 years. This book is based on the UN recommendations contained in the Orange Book. The IATA Dangerous Goods regulations contain all the requirements of the ICAO technical instructions, and the overall responsibility for the control of the carriage of dangerous goods by air rests with the International Civil Aviation Organization. The ADR is the responsibility of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. The ADR is the European Agreement concerning the international carriage of dangerous goods by road, and it is based on the Orange Book, the UN recommendations. The ADR is made up of 2 annexes. Annex A is the shipper's responsibility. This is to do with the classification of goods, the packaging, marking and labelling, and shipper's documentation. Annex B is to do with the carrier's responsibility. This will be to do with types of vehicles, vehicle markings, loading, stowing, unloading, driver training, and emergency procedures. The regulations concerning the international carriage of dangerous goods by rail is called RID. The European Agreement concerning the international carriage of dangerous goods by inland waterways is called ADN, and this is under the control of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. There are 9 classifications for dangerous goods, and they are the same for all modes of transport. 1 explosives, 2 gases, 3 liquids, 4 solids, 5 oxidizing substances, 6 poisonous and infectious substances, 7 radioactive materials, 8 corrosives, 9 miscellaneous dangerous goods. This would include substances that do not fall into the above 8 categories, but would pose a risk to safety if not properly prepared for carriage. One such item would be aerosols. Class 9 would have to be treated as hazardous cargo. The shipper would have to supply the dangerous goods declaration, and the cartons would have to be properly marked, packed and labelled accordingly. Subdivisions of classes 1 and 2. 1 being explosives. Just to be aware that there are 6 subdivisions of explosives. 2 gases. 2.1 flammable gases, that would be easily go on fire. 2.2 non-flammable gases, non-toxic, that's the green label. And 2.3 toxic gases, poisonous gases. So that would be the white label, inhalation hazard, and also the skull and crossbones. Subdivisions of classes 3 and 4. 3 being flammable liquids. 3.1 has a low flash point, that is below minus 18 degrees Celsius. 3.2 intermediate flash point, so that's between minus 18 degrees Celsius and plus 23 degrees Celsius. 3.3 a high flash point, so that is from plus 23 degrees Celsius to plus 61 degrees Celsius. Moving on now to solids, class 4. 4.1 flammable solids. 4.2 substances liable to spontaneous combustion, and 4.3 water reactive substances. So this is the blue label, and it's also known as dangerous when wet. Just wish to clarify what the difference is between flash point and spontaneous combustion. The flash point of a flammable liquid is the temperature at which the vapour from the liquid could be ignited by a flame or spark. And spontaneous combustion is the heat produced by chemical action within the substance itself causes it to catch fire. So here is a picture of a combusted hay bale. It went on fire by itself. Subdivisions of classes 5 and 6. 5 being oxidizing substances. 5.1 oxidizing substances. 5.2 organic peroxides. 6.1 poisonous substances, toxic, and 6.2 infectious substances. The shipper is the first link in the chain. The shipper makes the booking and has the overall responsibility for the correct details of the hazardous shipment. So there are 5 steps which are to be followed, and this sequence is common to the carriage of dangerous goods in all modes of transport and for all regulations. The first one is description of the goods. The second one is classification according to the hazard. The third one, packing, which is designated. Again, that's by the regulations. The fourth one is marking and labelling. Again, it's designated by the regulations. And the fifth is the signed declaration, shipper's declaration for dangerous goods. The shipper is responsible to provide the correct technical name, otherwise known as the proper shipping name, the PSN, and not the commercial name. Column 2 of Chapter 3.2 of both the IMDG Code and ADR manuals contain the PSN, and this must be advised on the Dangerous Goods Declaration. Have a look in the appendices of your Dangerous Goods Manual. We're looking at the Dangerous Goods list for ADR 2017, page numbered 348. This is the list of UN numbers in a numerical sequence. Now, if you look at column 1, you will see the UN number. This is the 4-digit number. Now look at column 2. This is the name and description of the goods, the PSN, the proper shipping name. This is the description of the goods, that should appear on the shipper's dangerous goods declaration. The UN recommendations contained in the Orange Book provide a list of the most common substances and articles, each with a unique UN number and proper shipping name. From this information, you can then identify the class of hazard. There are 9 classes of dangerous goods. The UN number has 4 digits, and it is found in column 1 of the United Nations list. So please have a look in the appendices of your dangerous goods manual and look at the page numbered 230. For example, we are going to look at UN number 1873, located in column 1. Column 2 provides the name and description of the goods, and we see that it is perchloric acid. Column 3 provides the class or divisions of hazard, and we see that the hazardous class is 5.1, which is an oxidizing substance. Column 4 advises of a subsidiary risk, if there is one, and in this case we are advised of class 8, which we know is corrosive. What this means is that the main hazard is class 5.1 and to a lesser extent class 8. Both hazardous labels would have to be displayed on the package. Column 5 advises the UN packing group, and in this case it is packing group 1, which is designated for the most dangerous hazardous cargo. The UN number is also known as identification number and must be advised on the shipper's declaration for dangerous goods. The UN number and the proper shipping name have to correspond, otherwise the documents will be rejected. The regulations outline specific instructions regarding appropriate packaging. Packing that passes the UN performance testing and is certified bears the designated UN symbol. The regulations may also set quantity restrictions per package and per shipment. So if we have a look here on the left hand side of this box, it has the UN markings, and we can refer to the chart on the right hand side. So first of all, we see it has the UN symbol, so this box has been certified and approved. 4 stands for the type of package. G is the material used. X is the packing group, and in this case X is packing group 1, 2 and 3. 8.1 refers to the maximum gross weight. S refers to solid, the inner of the carton is solid. 12 is the year of manufacture, and USA is the country of manufacture or approval. There are 3 UN packing groups indicating the degree of danger as follows. UN packing group 1 is great danger, UN packing group 2 medium danger, and UN packing group 3 minor danger. Here again you can look at another chart explaining the meaning of the UN approved package numbers. In particular, I want to look at the X. So X is for packing groups 1, 2 and 3, Y for packing groups 2 and 3, Z for packing groups 3 only. Marking and labelling. It's the responsibility of the shipper to ensure that they are marked and labelled correctly. There are strict regulations for the marking and labelling of each item, each package, for all modes of transport. The UN hazard labels must be attached to every dangerous goods package, and if possible, the label should be placed next to the shipper's or consignee's address. They should also be marked with a proper shipping name and corresponding UN number or ID number. And goods which are going via sea freight, the hazardous labels must be able to withstand 3 months immersion in seawater. In addition to the UN hazard labels, there are other labels used for warnings and instructions. They offer immediate information regardless of language. So we just have here the marine pollutant under the IMDG code, or we have the elevated temperature mark for all modes of transport except air freight. And then the bottom one here is for aircraft, cargo aircraft only. And then on the right hand side, we have other instructions labels, and these clarify handling requirements for a package. They make shipping and handling dangerous goods a safer process. So keep dry Do not double stack this way up. The shipper must complete the shipper's declaration for dangerous goods for all hazardous cargo and for all modes of transport. The freight forwarder should not complete this document. Now, the following information is common to all. You would need to have the shipper consignee name and address details, reference number, transport details, and the mode and routing and so on. And then you need to have the dangerous goods identification details, and this would be specifically the UN number, the proper shipping name, the class of hazard, the packing group where assigned, the number and description of packages, and the total quantity for each item. Shipper's Declaration. I hereby declare that the contents of this consignment are fully and accurately described by the proper shipping name and are classified, packaged, marked and labelled, placarded, and are in all respects in proper condition for transport, according to the applicable international and national governmental regulations. When the shipper signs this declaration, he assumes full responsibility. Shipments via air freight, IIFA. The IATA Shipper's Declaration, just refer to Appendices page 7, or the Multimodal Dangerous Goods Form to be completed, refer to Appendices page 3. Now, what's important is that both of these documents must be signed by the shipper. Sea freight shipments, IMO, IMDG. The Multimodal Dangerous Goods Form, again Appendices page 3, or the FIATA Shipper's Declaration for the Transport of Dangerous Goods Form can be used, refer to Appendices page 4. And both these shipper's declarations must be signed by the shipper. Also required is the Container Vehicle Packing Certificate, and this must be signed by the actual packer of the container or trailer. If loaded by the shipper, then it must be signed for by the shipper. If loaded by the freight forwarder, must be signed for by the freight forwarder. So both declarations are actually on the Multimodal Dangerous Goods Form and on the FIATA Shipper's Declaration. So it makes it a lot easier having both declarations on the one form. Documentation required for shipments via road freight, and this is under the ADR regulations. Multimodal Dangerous Goods Form, or the FIATA Shipper's Declaration for the Transport of Dangerous Goods Form, or the shipper can produce their own declaration once they refer to the ADR regulations. It is not required for shipper to sign hazardous declarations under ADR, but most shippers actually do sign. Can be signed by the shipper or on behalf of the shipper. Also required is a Container Vehicle Packing Certificate. Now, this must be signed by the actual packer of the container trailer. Also required is the Instructions in Writing. It's a 4-page document, and this is the actions in the event of an accident or emergency. And if goods are being shipped via road transport and sea freight, then the IMDG code takes precedence over the ADR rules. If it's an international road transport shipment and part of the route is via a ferry, then the IMDG code takes precedence over ADR. Driver requirements under ADR and also under the IMDG code to meet the Irish regulations. The driver has to ensure that the following are available in the cab at all times: a valid ADR driver training certificate, photo ID, this can be either a driving licence or a passport, transport document, shipper's dangerous goods declaration, instructions in writing. This is a 4-page document which details actions to be taken in the event of an accident or an emergency. This should be read by the driver and fully understood by the driver. Vehicle Certificate of Approval, issued by the RSA, the Road Safety Authority. All vehicles used for the carriage of hazardous cargo have to be tested and approved. Protective clothing. This would consist of a warning vest, gloves and eye protection for each member of the crew. Emergency kit. This would consist of a chalk, 2 self-standing warning signs, eye wash and depending on certain classes of hazard, a shovel, a drain seal, a bucket and an emergency escape mask would be required. Please refer to the appendices for a copy of the instructions in writing and the HSA ADR posters for further information. Under ADR regulations, vehicles must display a rectangular reflectorised orange coloured plate at the front and at the rear of the vehicle. This is also known as the Kemmler plate. And if we look here to the right, we'll see a Kemmler plate, and the top numbers are the HIN. These are the hazard identification numbers, and the bottom number is the SIN, substance identification number, also known as the UN number. So this would indicate that this is a full load containing the same hazardous cargo. The orange plates are left blank when the vehicle is either carrying a multi-load tanker or individual cartons, packages and drums, so a groupage load. In this instance, all the individual pieces are labelled with the relevant UN diamond hazardous labels. Here's an explanation of the Kemmler code under ADR. So we have a number here, 332. The first figure identifies the primary hazard, so this is class 3 flammable liquids. Now the second and third digits indicate secondary hazards, but where the first and second digits are the same, an intensification of the primary hazard is indicated. So we have another 3. So that means that there is a fire risk. And then the secondary hazard, which is the number 2, means that gas may be given off. And then if there is an X on the Kemmler code, that means water is prohibited. Containers and vehicles carrying hazardous cargo need to be marked with hazard diamond labels called placards. They must not be less than 250 millimeters by 250 millimeters in size. Now, a container needs 4 placards, one on each side and one on each end of the container. I'm just looking at this container here. I know it's a little bit blurred, but I think we have 2 hazard classifications here. We've got 5.1 oxidizing substance and we have a class 8 corrosive. Now, placards have to be durable and able to withstand immersion in seawater for up to 3 months. In the case of accidents involving dangerous goods, emergency response units and firefighters rely on the UN hazard placards Kemmler plate on vehicles to quickly and correctly identify the hazards involved and manage accordingly. This is where it is vitally important that the vehicle's cargo are marked clearly and correctly, according to the regulations. The shipper has the ultimate responsibility to declare the hazardous goods correctly. This would be the proper shipping name and the UN number, and then all of the rest of the hazardous requirements follow on from that information. Everyone in the link of the chain has responsibility to abide by the rules. And in the case of groupage, they rely on the individual markings of each piece to know exactly what hazards they are dealing with. So when there is a hazardous incident, the emergency response unit know exactly what the hazard is and how best to deal with it. The Dangerous Goods Safety Advisor is responsible to the management of the company to ensure compliance with applicable regulations. Effective from the 1st of January 2000, companies who load, handle, transport, pack or fill receptacles in all but limited quantities have to appoint a Dangerous Goods Safety Advisor. Both the ADR and the RID regulations have adopted the DGSA legislation. The main functions of the Dangerous Goods Safety Advisor would be monitoring compliance of rules governing the transport of dangerous goods, advice to employer in all matters relating to the proper handling of dangerous goods to ensure compliance with all dangerous goods regulations, issue annual reports to the employer on all activities, shipments, issues that arose in relation to hazardous cargo, monitor the proper training of employees, making sure that employees are properly trained for their specific function and that all training is kept up to date. The UN recommendations identify the need for general awareness training, function-specific training, safety training. So in relation to safety training, for example, that could be in the warehouse for recognising and handling hazardous cargo correctly. I would just like to touch on general awareness training because I think it's very important for all staff members of freight forwarding companies, because some people might say, oh, I don't work in operations and I'm in sales and I don't handle any dangerous goods, so I don't need to know. Well, yes, everyone does need to know, at least how to recognise dangerous goods and follow all safety precautions. And even freight forwarding companies who do not transport hazardous cargo, they should at least provide awareness training to their staff. The forwarder owes a duty of care to his staff and to the general public by providing at least awareness training to his employees. This may help in detecting suspect cargo that could otherwise be shipped without proper packing and labelling and put cargo handlers and others at risk. Now, training is compulsory under the IATA and ADO regulations, and employers should ensure that sea freight personnel who will be following the IMDG code, that they receive appropriate training. So hazardous training, it's all about safety and limiting the risks for everyone. The freight forwarder plays a vital role in the transport chain. Whether acting as agent or carrier, the forwarder has responsibility to ensure all hazardous information is transmitted to all parties concerned. The forwarder should only accept dangerous goods for shipment if they are accompanied by the shipper's dangerous goods declaration and in compliance with the regulations. The forwarder staff should be trained in line with their specific functions to ensure they are in compliance with the regulations. The forwarder should also have liability insurance and inform their liability insurers that they transport dangerous goods. So in the event, if there is an incident that they may be held liable for, then they would be covered under insurance. What is FIATA doing in relation to the carriage of dangerous goods? Well, FIATA is heavily committed and involved on an ongoing basis with the various working groups that are devoted to steadily improving and developing both recommendations and all regulations with a view to standardisation. FIATA has introduced its own FIATA Shipper's Declaration for the Transport of Dangerous Goods. It's based on the Multimodal Dangerous Goods Declaration recommended by the United Nations. It's approved for use by both the IMDG code and ADO regulations. And FIATA has published a FIATA Introduction to the Regulations for the Safe Handling and Transport of Dangerous Goods. This sets out the basic principles applying to the carriage of dangerous goods in the various modes of transport, specifically for freight forwarders. Well, thank you for your time and attention. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this webinar. It's been my pleasure, and I hope you've enjoyed this one and found it to be of benefit. If you have any questions at all, please contact myself, Gráinne, at the IIFA office.